to thank Skyport, the sponsors of the exhibition, Skyport, Conyers, Orange Bay Company Limited, and Michelle Seymour Smith, in addition to Susan Pateras, who's given support in the way of reaching out to people and putting things together for us. So it doesn't always have to be funding. You can support us by volunteering your services, spreading the word. You can spend $10 and get this very cool tote bag. And that is a way of supporting us as well. Usually, exhibitions open for BNG members. So there's a members preview event before the show opens to the public. Because of this collaboration with the Bermuda Tourism Authority, sorry, I'm aging myself, and Art Month, this event here has been opened to the public so that we can properly launch Art Month. I will say, though, that Bermuda National Gallery has 3 more exhibitions opening between now and Christmas. It's a busy season. And if you would like to get on our membership list, these are my props back here. Sign up for membership. And I will say, just for tonight only, so October the 1st, day 1 of Art Month, launch of Art Month, if you sign up for membership today, our membership year runs from April the 1st to March the 31st. If you sign up today, we will extend your membership through to March 2025. So that's essentially giving you 6 months of membership free. That gives you artist previews, invitations to exhibition openings, preferential sign-ups and discounted pricings for all of our programs. We do kind of hands-on art workshops. If you have kids, we've got summer camps, midterm break camps. We were actually just awarded 2 awards in the Bermudian Magazine's inaugural Family Favorites Awards. So we have been named Best Art Museum for Kids and also Best Summer Camp. So we're really, really proud of that. And that just kind of shows that is the community voting on for who they think should win these categories. So that's really good validation that the hard work that our small team puts in, we have 4.5 people on staff, and we really, strive to present world-class exhibitions and programming for every member of your family. So without further ado, if you like what we're doing, if you're excited about this show, wait till you see what's to come. And support us. Take out a membership, buy a tote bag, tell your friends, so that we can continue to do the good work. Gherdai and Yesha will be coming up any minute now to just have a chat with you. So it's my pleasure to announce Gherdai's Threads Unravelling as officially open, and I will invite them up to start their artist talk. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, beloved. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Yesha.
That's far away. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate you. You look nice.
Okay, guys. Yeah. Thank you.
With grace, too. Checkity check, check, check. Aw. I will not. Can everybody hear me? No? Okay, it was just projection then. That was the issue. Gherdai Hassell, a daughter of the salt, the soil, and the sea, arrives at the seam of colonial genesis and servitude. She doesn't shy from this. Her work leans in and intersects a confounding identity. She's always knee-deep in the earth, always pulling up roots. Her collage alibi figures feature heavily layered eyes, as if built upon layer of the onion from which she springs. the onion, her consistent recurrence and identifying principle of investigation is a monument of Bermudian identity. Bermudians refer to themselves as onions. They feature heavily in local cuisine, in the naming of food establishments, and for the official New Year's Eve celebration, Bermudians venture to see the onion drop. It has lasted, if even bereft of its origin status. It's easy to remember a nickname, a trial to recall how you acquired it. For people who hardly have the opportunity to see themselves outside of tourism adverts or tongue-in-cheek conspiracy theories, Bermudians become a beach, a pair of shorts, a long tail and a coin, a triangle to be worn. You wrote this, Jim? Gherdai is a mirror, one that reflects and retells. She creates as if to continue the ancestral work of minding the onion seeds. I don't know who wrote that, but it was brilliant. What's up, Ben?
What's up, Aisha?
This is my brethren, so I'm gonna talk to her like she's my brethren. All right, nothing hard. Let's begin at the beginning. How did you get here? It's the Lord's Day, October 1st. We made it. My God. This many months in, this year has been wild. 2023, we're in the National Gallery having a conversation.
Yes, we are.
How did you get here?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here and sharing space with us today. Aisha, thank you so much for always lending an ear and being on this artistic journey with me. It really means a lot to me. And I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to be here with us today. So the beginning starts me, I would say, at Berkeley Institute as a student who loved art but could never see myself as an artist here in Bermuda. So my high school teacher, Christine Bauman, who couldn't be here today because she's off island, really instilled within me values that I feel like run really deep, a real love for art. But you know, growing up in Bermuda, I didn't really see that this was a viable career for me. So, you know, and that's why I think for young people to be able to see someone who is, you know, standing forth and doing this is extremely important. But I didn't see anybody who was really doing it on a way that I wanted to do it. So I just didn't think that it was possible. And so I went away to school and thought that I wanted to do medicine, and then after that ended up going to law school and hated it. And so I decided that I would quit law school and pursue a path that I felt like was really, truly authentic to myself. It was a tough decision, but I just made the decision in an instant one day and decided that because I didn't really know how to journey as an artist, I decided that I would just sort of make up my own path and just like make it up as I go. And so I really felt like I needed to get life experience, because I think, you know, as artists, we should be able to draw a direct line from life and art. And so I felt like I needed more life experience. And so that's when I decided to move to China, which ended up being like one of the hardest things that I've ever done, a decision that I made. But it really grew me as an artist. I was able to really develop a spiritual practice that has grounded me. And honestly, I can say that that is like literally the foundation of all of the successes that I've seen. Really connecting with that, a meditative practice, a yoga practice, a writing practice, and my artistic practice. And so I found in my journey from the beginning that there's always been a continuity between my personal development as an individual growing simultaneously with my artistic practice. They're interconnected, but I view them differently, but I approach my life in a very creative way. And so as I am creating artwork, I'm also creating my life at the same time. And so they're sort of moving I would like to believe an upward sort of trajectory and moving simultaneously. So yes, spent some time in China, and then at that point decided to go and do my master's of contemporary art, which I've just completed in 2022. And so many successes. Thank you. Thank you. So many successes since then. And one of the things that I think is really special about my journey too is that there's been, so I really believe that if you declare that you want something and you commit yourself to that with, definiteness of purpose, you focus, you hone in, you have belief and action working together at the same time, I really believe that you're met halfway. And I can honestly, truly say that the circumstances that have come, that I've experienced in my life, the people that I've met along the way, because, this is definitely not something that I'm doing alone. There are people who have been instrumental in my success as well, just like Jennifer mentioned, the BNG, one of those entities. And so I've been met with circumstances, people, opportunities, networking opportunities, exhibitions that have sort of pushed me along. And, I sit here today as a proud Bermudian, and just committed to the path.
And it's funny because, I've watched, I guess, the later part of this matriculation of yours. And in the last few years, it seemed quite meteoric. Do you know what I mean? Like all of your exhibitions have been stacked one after the other. You showed here in Bermuda in 2021, I believe, for the first time.
And that's when we met.
That's when we met. Yes. Right here.
Yes,
thanks, BNG.
Literally.
Thank you. It's been a vibe. And I guess this is also like the beginning of our artistic collaboration officially, like to the public.
Yes.
But you showed here at the National Gallery, you showed at the National Museum, and then it's been at least a show since then every year. And I want to say 2 maybe. And now you had your first exhibition in the United States at CUS in DC.
Yes.
It's like one flight you lot, just go. You know what I mean?
I would love
Mahari
that.
Sakar Gallery. Let's talk about your work then. If we're thinking about art, and as artists, to be one means to be in conversation with a plethora of things, many things, people, ancestry, memories. What would you say you are in conversation with, and that your work is representative of those conversations?
That's such a good question, because I definitely believe that art isn't made, within a vacuum. I feel like art sort of is generative, and so, there are things that are happening all around me that I take in. I listen, I pay attention to the things that I'm experiencing just in my life. But when I first began my artistic practice and, what I felt like I wanted to present here in Bermuda for my first solo exhibition, I Am Because You Are, was deeply rooted in what I felt like a social responsibility to present something to Bermuda, to the Bermudian public, that needed to happen at that particular time. The work was very deep. It was based upon ancestral ties. It was very much so inspired by my own family tree. It was heavily researched, and I spent quite a bit of time on that. And so, I felt like because I had the opportunity to, an amazing opportunity to present my work to Bermuda on such a scale, in such a place such as this, I felt like I needed to do something of extreme importance and impact. So the work begins with ancestors, and that's point blank period. Mm-hmm. It begins with that. And so that work was paying homage, because I think there's been sort of like a trajectory in my experience in that it begins with the past, but then it's negotiated here in this present moment. And then the work that I'm making now is sort of based upon what I envision being and experiencing in the future. And so I'm looking at my work. My work is sort of time-based, so it's based on simultaneously happening, past, present, and future all happening at the same time, and sort of peeling back layers of meaning in that. And so, essentially based upon family ties, ancestors, research, but ultimately I feel like the work is based on what it means to be Bermudian, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be Black, what it means to be a person of colonial heritage. And I think that, you know, we sort of like move and inhabit different identities like all at once. Like we're not just like living in a bubble, but also like one-dimensionally, like we're multi-dimensional beings. And so I would say ultimately, fundamentally, at the core of my work, I'm looking at what it means to be human. And that's what I'm exploring.
And how to exist here. And it's important because, I mean, you say, I mean, we have similar trajectories, although I went a completely different way where I was like, nah, I'm going to just be an artist. I don't care. But I'm not going to get a job. But it's true. But it's so interesting. We had a similar experience, right, where you look around and you're like, who's doing this vocationally for real? And that's not to say that Bermudian artists are not being Bermudian artists, because they are.
Absolutely.
But the Bermudian artists, and they work at BFNAM, and they work at Gorham's, and they have all these multiple other things going on. Like, there's never a time to like you have to set aside time for practice.
Yes.
And that is heavy.
And it's difficult.
It is difficult. I mean, we had a conversation the other day where you asked me, like, when are you writing your manuscript? Girl, I ain't. When can I do that?
Yeah.
But you now exist in this space in which you embody this artist that you would have liked to have seen at the time of your youth, at your genesis. How does that feel? And how does it feel also, and this is going to be heavy, I'm sorry, girl.
It's okay. It's all right. Just give it all to me. It's all right.
How does it feel to be walking representation for Bermudians and Bermudian artists specifically? Because that's a heavy load to bear. We're a small nation, but we don't have much of seeing ourselves ever outside of her. We see each other here in a vacuum. You know what I mean? Like, and we know each other, but on a scale, you know, I say that your rise has been meteoric. It's been the last 3 years. We see you everywhere now.
Yeah.
How do you carry that?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. It is heavy, so let me just take a deep breath. You know, I really and truly felt like this was possible. Because just because I hadn't seen it didn't mean that it wasn't possible. And so I wholeheartedly and truly believe that to be true. And so I felt like if I knew it was possible, but I wasn't seeing it, that if there was nobody else at the time in my genesis and beginning the working on this scale, that I needed to do it, right? Like I felt like I needed to do it because that's what I wanted to see. And so now, it's so funny, my little sister just came up to me earlier and was telling me that I am the artist of the week at her school, which is amazing. And that's like
crazy.
Incredible to be able to experience something like that. And for her to be able to see me in school as a relative, you know, like that's important, you know, to be able to see ourselves is important. And so it is a lot of responsibility, but also I feel like I'm not doing the work alone either. There are so many artists who are also working right now and doing work. I think that there is a real renaissance that's happening in Bermuda.
Oh, girl,
so
the art
many
youths.
incredible.
There's some of them over there. They haven't met you
Thank
yet.
you guys
but
for coming. I appreciate you guys coming.
you don't even know.
Yes, Jade, Liana, like so many people who are working and actually like making work. So the work is being made, right? I'm not the only person who is out here doing that. And that's the truth. I'm not the only person. But what I do recognize to be true too is that if you are the first to do certain things, there is a responsibility, especially within a community like this, to hold the door open behind you, you know?
Sure,
and
right.
So, yes. And so that's really like that's important to me. And, I'm sort of like at the beginning of my career, but I really do have so many plans on how I'm going to extend opportunities to other Bermudian artists as well. I am currently at the moment in the process of curation, learning about curation and, learning about how to curate other artists into exhibitions. And so I think like when you have a platform, it's like you have to use it. It's like, if you're given so much, it's like so much is required of you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's like you guys keep making art. Please keep doing it. I see you, and continue on your path. And I am here. I'm readily available anytime anybody needs to reach out to me. I'm an open book, and available for any type of advice or anything. And so yes, thank you for that question. I appreciate that.
Speaking about holding the door open, can you speak to your tutelage, your experience of having tutelage here? I know that you were under the mentorship of Sharon.
Yes.
Can you speak about that? I feel like you kind of like wiggled your way in.
Mm-hmm. I did.
let us know, girl.
Okay, so I recognize Sharon Wilson as a light. She couldn't be here today, but I recognized her as a light early on my path. And I actually met her because I was back home in Bermuda at the time, and I was working for a website development company at the time, and her name came up on the list as a person to call to see if she needed a new website. And so I called her with the intention of selling her a website, and she invited me up to her studio, and this was probably 2014, 2015, and I was like, I think that was necessary for me on my path. So that's what I mean about these circumstances that sort of all align, because I didn't know I was gonna end up in Sharon Wilson's studio, with her one-on-one personally, to be able to talk before I made the decision to be an artist. But it was like when I walked into her space, it was as if I walked into a portal. I'd never seen an artist studio before that, and been there personally and being able to see works in progress. Because works in progress are very different than how works sort of function in a studio space. So she had works up on the easel. She had lots of things that she was working on. And so I'd never seen how an artist studio was laid out, and I was blown away, and just I don't know, something happened to me where I was this is what I want to do. And I guess I've always known that I was an artist, but I think it's the representation, seeing it, that really makes a difference. And walking into her space made it a reality for me. And so I actually didn't end up selling her the website, which is fine.
You didn't do your job, Gherdai?
I didn't sell her the website, but told her that I would love to stay in contact with her. And I said to her at the time, I was I want to be an artist. And she was like, okay, well, show me your work. And I literally did not have anything to show her at that time. So it was interesting saying oh, I'm an artist, but not really having anything to show. And so I told her that I would stay in contact with her, and that, and interestingly for me, when I did the exhibition at BSOA in 2019, the first time I really exhibited in Bermuda, I invited her back, and I wanted to show Sharon Wilson that I was the artist. And so I reached out to her and told her I was having this exhibition, and I would love for her to come. So she actually came. I was like, oh my gosh. So I was I felt starstruck. I'm it's Sharon Wilson. So she came, and ever since then, we've kept a relationship, we speak. But shortly after that, I asked her if she would be my mentor, and she told me no. She told me that she would not be my mentor, but that she viewed me as a peer. And that for me was so special, yes.
Girl.
And that was amazing to me because, you know, we think about like, you know, if you're just sort of beginning in a place, we think like we need to seek mentorship or like someone that could sort of help us and, you know, guide us along the way. But she's by default become that, like just by way of her opening her door to me. Every time I come back home, I see her, I spend time with her. When I was in China, she specifically sat on the phone with me and helped me debrief after critiques because critiques were extremely difficult. But one of the things that she really has instilled within me is the way in which art is supposed to function. That it shouldn't just be like an aesthetic thing, but how is the art functioning within society? What are the types of conversations that are happening? How do you center yourself? How do you see yourself in the work? So she was asking me questions that were not being posed in graduate school. And it's through those like connections that, like I was saying, you know, the people that show up in your life that really like help you and guide you. And she's been an absolute treasure and gift in my life.
She's important. Sharon Wilson, I believe she goes by Muhammad now?
Yes.
Sharon Muhammad.
I call her on Sharon, but
we don't all have that privilege. I'm gonna call her Miss Muhammad, you know what I'm saying? But she's important because she was one of the first people to really depict Bermudians and Black Bermudians in art. Her and Bill Ming, you know, as far as we're talking about an artistic lineage of which you are spawning from. There's a deep steps to walk into and to be able to be told like, oh no, I'm not gonna like teach you. We are walking together, which is immense. And especially around the conversations, because every time I view your work, I mean, when I first met you, the first time I walked into the gallery, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in conversation with these works. So I know that you are in active conversation with them. And I want to pull out a particular piece, a particular facet of your work that shows up constantly, and it's your alibi figures.
My girls.
So the etymology of the word alibi is Latin, and it means elsewhere, from the word alias, meaning other, and it is the plea of having been elsewhere at the act and the time and place of commission, the fact or state of being elsewhere at the time. Why are the women in your pieces regarded as alibis? What is the significance?
I love that. Okay, so first of all, I'll just briefly talk about like how they came to be. So at the time I began collaging when I was in China. Before I went to graduate school, sort of self-taught and just like painting after work at my home studio. And painting felt like the thing that I needed to do in order to be an artist. I think because coming from Bermuda, it's like it's very conservative, right? So I think in my mind, I always had that if I was going to be an artist, that meant that I needed to paint. And so I was painting in oil painting, which is very difficult. And you can spend a very long time.
Lengthy.
Yes, a very long time.
When does it dry, girl?
It doesn't ever. Matter of fact, it's still not dry. Yeah, it just felt just too long and just too constricted for me. And so to switch it up a bit or to just sort of get like a creative burst out, I started to look around to see like what I had just in front of me. And I really love fashion. And so at this particular time, I had like a stack of like Vogue magazines sitting just like in my studio. I just always like to look at the fashion and stuff. And so I decided that, you know, I would just pick them up and just like play with them. And I think that's one of the things too that is important in art making as well. It's like you don't need like really expensive materials and supplies in order to make something amazing. I just think it's important just to begin where you are. And so, yeah, I just began like collaging, like with what I have. And so collage has literally transformed my practice monumentally, because painting sort of felt constricted, whereas collage, I felt like it was a language that I could make up on my own. I mean, there is a lineage of people who are Caucasian art historically way before me, but it felt like I could approach it in a way where I didn't have to follow the rules. And so at the time also I was dealing with just literally stepping outside of my door in China and being either followed, photographed, recorded, having to deal with like racially charged experiences and things like that. And so it was really intense just being in China all the time. I could just like step outside my door and there were people who were like intrigued. And a lot of times maybe not even to be harmful or anything like that, but just like out of sheer curiosity, like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here in the middle of China? So was dealing with that like on a daily basis. And so the alibis emerged as a way for me to sort of process this gaze that I was dealing with every day. So the layers of the eyes began as a way to sort of distance the figure, which I viewed as myself, from the eyes, which began initially as Chinese eyes. So when I was in China at first, and if you look at my earlier works, they have Chinese eyes. Yes, they have Chinese eyes. And so for me, it was like creating that distance between like people looking at me and, you know, gazing at me. And for me, it was just therapy at first. And I actually never envisioned anybody seeing them publicly. It was just something that I was just doing, because I didn't view it as art. I viewed painting as art. I didn't view collage as art. It sort of, for me at the time, felt like craft. And so I just used to do it like as a thing. And yeah, that's essentially how they began. But now they've evolved since then, and the eyes have now switched to the eyes of Black women, which I think was a necessary switch along my journey. And so the layers on the eyes are now existing as safe spaces and containers for being. And the reason I chose the word alibi and I put the two eyes at the end was because I was thinking about like the word alibi as like, if I'm in something and I have someone next to me, it's like this person is assisting me in something. And so it felt like, they felt like self-portraits, but then they also felt like, you know, like real entities that were assisting me on my path as well. And so then I put the double I at the end because I also felt like there was sort of this double consciousness that I was dealing with in my experience there. So they've evolved, and honestly, they have been the thing that has sort of taken on a life of their own. Yeah. I never envisioned that they would even be what they are. And yeah, I love making them. I really do. And when I was in China, I began experimenting with like Chinese calligraphy inks. And so what I did was I would take the inks, which are usually supposed to use for like calligraphy and rice paper. And I decided that I would use like different types of paper, just experimenting. And I started making like skin that is different. So the skin is like black, but the skin sort of acts as like a camouflage. And if you use the ink on a different type of paper other than rice paper, it sort of functions and lays on the paper differently. So for me, in that way, I was dealing with what it meant to walk in the world as a Black person within China. But also, it was important for me to take a material that's so sort of like heavily based within Chinese culture and use it in a different way than they do. Because it's almost like I'm creating the thing that they're curious about me for. So it felt like a switching or sort of like a mediation for what I was experiencing.
And also being able to use the materials that you have at hand, which is just part of just like diasporic experience.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like we eat codfish and potatoes because it's right there. It became part of our culture based on what we had at hand.
Yes.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and so I love them. You know, ideally, I would love to see them all around Bermuda in so many different Bermudians' homes. Yes. Yes, I love them. And, you know, I think, you know, sort of thinking about where they have carried me and also like where I'm going with them, I'm thinking about ways that I can sort of expand them in ways. I'm thinking about bringing them to life. I'm thinking about them in relationship to fashion. And so, yeah, they're taking on life of its
Girl,
own.
so let's talk about that because, I mean, I remember the Artifacts page that you had on Instagram. That's still there.
Yes.
And the podcast that I was really hoping to get on one day, but never did. It's okay, we're here now. And then I've seen the alibis change. I've seen the alibis show up in the Onion Spawn series. I've seen now you move into textile. I've seen you now move into abstraction.
Yes.
Let's talk about that journey. And then what happens next?
Yes. So I think that one of the things that really interests me about being an artist is the idea that you can continually like reinvent yourself. And so while I feel like I've been known for creating like my alibi figures, like that in a way sometimes felt like limiting. And so I always was thinking about ways that I could push my practice a little bit more. I could challenge myself a little bit more, thinking about what I'm reading, what I'm consuming, what I'm also like, you know, not in a vacuum, like taking in different things that I'm experiencing and just push a little bit farther, a little bit more. I never really wanted to be tied to one specific medium. And so I view myself as a multidisciplinary artist, and so that means that I'm working in multiple media, and I am working in ways that best communicate what it is that I'm trying to say with that specific work. So sometimes the work might show up as collage, sometimes it shows up as sculpture, sometimes it might show up as, you know, textile. It just sort of varies, and I love the idea of that. I love being able to, you know, take just my creativity and imagine more than, you know, what I've done in the past. And so it's, for me, being an artist is the most challenging, most exciting, most imaginative thing I could do. I've never read as much. I've never had like deep inquiry. I've never researched as much as I have otherwise, like doing other things. Like this is a very intellectual vocation, and I think that it in a lot of ways is undervalued. But I feel like the way that I approach my art making is in a scholarly way, and it's just
you are
challenged
practicing.
me. Yes, it's deep practice, and so the work has at this point moved on to textiles, which is super exciting. Because at the moment I am currently based in an old textile mill in the UK. And so I think subconsciously that's sort of like playing out within my practice. Again, looking around, listening, paying attention. And I think because I'm in an old textile mills, like the fashion thing is also sort of whispering, saying it wants to be made and yeah, and created and brought into the world. So yeah, a lot of my practice is like listening to something that I feel like is larger than myself, and I just view myself as like a vessel to bring whatever I have ideas or visions about forth into reality, and that's why I don't feel like the work is mine. Like I feel like it's coming through me, but I feel like it's yours. It's like other people's. It's, you know, it's not meant to live in my studio. That's why I want people to become collectors. I want the work to exist within public collections and museum spaces, because it's not just supposed to be in my studio. You know, I do want the work to get out there, because that's what we do when, you know, you've been given a gift, is you give it away. So,
and that was, you've said this before. You said that art is a gift that you have, that you've been given, and you can't hold on to it. So in thinking about that, how do you create? Do you create like fervently in order to like encapsulate the gift while you have it? And because we also talked about, you know, privately how, you know, genius, whatever it is, or something that visits you, it doesn't stay with you. It exists
Yeah.
in the world, in the universe. It is here.
Yeah.
And if you don't use it,
Somebody
it
else
will
will.
just go to wherever else it has to go. So how does the gift that you have, that you get, that isn't yours, how does that relate to your practice? And I ask because there are artists here. There are people who create and make, we have the art youths, we have people who are here writing and making things. So how does that relate to your practice? Do you just grab that and go?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because you have been consistently making now, I know for like the last few months, on non-stopping.
Yeah, I'm exhausted, very tired, very, very tired, and on very low sleep. But, I think before I had like this idea within my mind that art would just sort of like magically show up, but it doesn't. It is work. It is work. And so I'm in my studio every day. I mean, if you ask my friends, Sinenas, I'm in there every single day. Like, I show up, and I'm committed to it. Like, it's a practice.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I go into my studio and I just have like frustrating days where I just feel like I can't get out of my head, or I can't make something. So I don't know if you guys have heard about this book. It's called The Artist's Way, which I highly recommend, even if you're not artist. But they have this thing, I think the author is like Julia Cameron or something, and she has in the book how we should use this thing called morning pages, which is essentially like a brain dump. You take like a couple minutes every day and just like, get the ideas like out of your head. And for me, I sort of use it as a way to just clear my mind of like whatever's going on, and then I can just like work. But one of the things that I will say has like sort of carried me through, even during like moments of frustration where I feel like, oh, I just can't make something, or I make something and I hate it, it's like ugly and I never want anyone to see it, is I just show up. I just keep showing up every day, every day, every day. And anything that we do that we are committed to every single day on a consistent basis, you get good. I mean, you could practice anything and never have learned how to do it and acquire that skill with practice. And so art making is a practice, and so it is genius in a way, but the genius only visits those who are working. So
a bar. Someone write it down. It's a bar. The genius only visits those who are working. My God. In thinking about how your pieces look right now, and the lineage of which you spring from, there is a lot of Black representation. I know you've mentioned that you want to see Black representation where joy is the primary experience.
Yeah.
After, the representation of Blackness is always kind of collected with trauma or pain or, whatever the historiography is. Talk more about this and what you feel your role in navigating joy is becoming.
Yes. So when I did my solo exhibition here at BNG, the debut solo, that work was really, really heavy. It looked specifically at our Bermudian heritage and our relationship to the transatlantic slave trade and how that sort of functioned within our community. And it was deep. And, it was heavy. Like, I spent a lot of time in emotional distress, unpicking that history, looking at archival materials, sort of, and envisioning who people could have been. It was a lot of work, and it was emotionally draining. I think, like, as scholars, if we're engaged in that sort of history, it's important for us to sort of take moments to like step back and like get rest. And so because I began in familial like lineages and ancestry, I felt like that work was necessary. particularly for Bermuda. We needed somebody who was going to like, talk about this, but in a visual way. Because we have historians, we have storytellers, Ajala, Liana,
scholars,
yes,
it's a lot.
People are doing the work. But I really wanted to see what that work could like look like visually. And so, having done that, I felt like that was a good place to sort of begin. But that wasn't the way that I want my work to function all the time. As an artist, I feel like as an artist, you have the ability to evoke emotion in many different ways. And joy is something that I wanted to spread in this world. And so my work is vibrant, it's colorful, and I want to talk about rest. I want to talk about us and happiness. I want to talk about like where we see ourselves in moments of respite, where we see ourselves like enjoying sort of the full spectrum of life, like not just in trauma, not just in like the pain and the suffering and things that we've experienced. I think it's important to remember moments like that. But in my role as an artist, I wanted to deal with that first and then put it aside. And everything that I've made since then has been about our joy and about our play. I did a site-specific exhibition installation at the National Museum in Dockyard, and that exhibition included images of children playing, of us playing marbles, of our gumbes, us playing cricket. So really just looking at like our life, because it's not just about pain and trauma. And so I want my work, the work that I'm making now, to negotiate that, but also to envision like who we could be as well. So the work is very heavily linked with Afrofuturism as well, and thinking about how we're living right now and imagining sort of like how we would function in the future. Because if we're living now, like we exist in the future too. So, and the future is created now. And so the work I want to be like about joy.
The fact that we exist as Black people means that the future is possible. You know what I mean? Like ancestry, being able to exist in the world, having ancestors is proof that sustainability of survival is possible. Like there is no other way that Black people could be here other than that the future is inevitable for us. And so the essay that I read from earlier was one in conversation with your work in Manchester. And you just mentioned a few minutes earlier about how everything's happening all at once. And that was something that I said about your work being a consideration of the concurrence of time and ancestry, how to be everything at once, how the past happens within you, a bloodline, and thereby a future. Like it's, and that was something that, I'm brilliant, man. Smart, like. But it's something that's so evident in your work, right? That we don't want to just confined to this space of which we're constantly being thrown at as people of color, as Black people, as people who are descended from people who were enslaved, but that there is hope and joy. And I want to know, what other perspectives do you feel you have not explored yet in your work? There's a beautiful poem by John Keats, I think. Maybe, I don't know. It's a lot of work to prepare for things like these. But it's Ode to a Grecian Urn. And in it's Keats, right? Blah, blah. In the realm of poetry, an ode is a thing of which you bestow upon something that you truly love. But it is also a form of perspective. You don't just deliver an ode just to say that, oh, I like this thing. It's one that has depth and range and space. So I ask that, meaning, what perspectives have you not yet explored? Is there another vantage point that your work has yet to filter from or be filtered through?
Jeez, that's a lot.
Gotta be smart, girl.
That's a good question. Well, I feel like what has come up thus far in my practice, up until this point, everything that I've wanted to explore up until this point, I've been working through it. I honestly and truly feel like my usage of the onion as a metaphor for
Girl.
layers of identity
Girl.
is like, it's such a foundation, and just like, it honestly made me recognize what my alibis were actually doing. So the eyes on the alibi are the layers of the onion. And I did not make that connection until after reading Nellie Musson's book, Mind the Onion Seed. And I honestly and truly feel like I could use the onion as a metaphor in my work and explore a plethora of things. It could be like, it felt like for me in making that connection that I had unearthed like just a treasure of gold that I could just like dissect, and I could, you know, peel back more layers, and I can create new things and new ideas about. And so I really feel like that's gonna be the staple for my life's work.
Yes.
So myself and my relationship to the onion, this is the beginning phases of it, but I really feel like I'll be exploring the onion in many different ways. So I'll be exploring it through color. I'll be exploring it through abstraction. I'll be exploring it through fashion. I'll also be exploring it in functional art, like how we live with art within spaces. And I really feel like it's been like a guiding light for me. And so so when you talk about like vantage point, like that as a foundation has given me like a whole like 360 perspective on how I could approach like art making. And so like I think it's really important to you know, sort of ground yourself in the idea that there is something in your artistic practice that can guide you along the way. And so I would encourage every artist to figure out like what that thing is.
Ooh.
And to identify that, and also align it with like values. Like, what are your values? Like, what do you care about? And how can you use that thing, that like little niche or that nugget, and marry all of these different ideas and things that you care about? Like, what are you saying as an artist? What are you trying to communicate? And so yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does, of course it does. I have another heavily weighted question that I'll save for last, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay.
But before that, I'm going to springboard for something you said, because I know, but these lovely people might not know, that even how when you were in deep research with Nellie Musson's text, I know for a fact that you were receiving this in spurts, in pieces, scanned documents for someone who has it. It's an interesting thing to be of a culture. You know, we speak of representation. It's an interesting thing to not be able to see yourself represented, right? We just can't. And then it's another interesting thing to even try to dig into the archives, and they're falling apart in front of your very eyes, meaning that Mind the Onion Seed by Nellie E. Musson is out of print.
Yeah.
And it exists in some of you lot's grandest houses somewhere, right? But other than that, we have no access to it. And you have happened to find someone who has a copy, who's like, yo, scan me the next 2 chapters. And even that, you receiving it in these layers, in these pieces.
Yeah. Isn't
Do you
that
know what I
interesting?
mean?
Yes. It's really interesting to think about it in that way. And shout out to Christy Warren, who's been
A scholar, an academic, a genius.
A Bermudian scholar who's based in the UK, who I've done studio visits with, and she's written about my work as well. she's really helped me get some of the images. But also, I just want to say, as like a side note, someone DM'd me yesterday and has the book for me. So
What, girl?
yes.
I need one too, so
Yeah,
just sort that out.
So I'm gonna get the book before I go. But
Chingas!
yeah, it's been years now that I've been, sort of
I don't
receiving
even know what to
pieces
do
of
with
the
that,
book.
girl.
Yeah, so I actually meant to tell you that I have a gift for you, and it was that. But
Girl, what? Don't tell me in front of all these people. I don't know how to act.
but
I could cry.
yes, so I have not held the book tangibly, like physically, but it's meant so much, to my practice, and getting it in like pieces and layers, like there's something there that I think even can be sort of like dissected and explored. Like maybe I couldn't get it all at once.
No.
And I could just like, get pieces and digest a few things and then, bring that forth. But I'm really happy that you asked the question about Nellie Musson's book, because you, as
What
someone,
you want to say, sis?
I just want to say it, but like you as someone who is deeply connected to your craft and, a student of Bermudian literature, for you, how important is it for you to be able to see yourself reflected in a literary way, like, because I just remember like growing up in school, and there really weren't that many like texts that, felt or were taught in a way where it was like, this was like a mandatory reading and that I could remember and that I like resonated with, like as a Bermudian. Like Nellie Musson's book should be required reading in school, like absolutely. So like for you, and now working up I know you weren't prepared for no questions, but
No.
for you, like
I have the papers.
like working as a professor, like up the college, like how important is it for you as an educator to ensure that you are presenting like these types of necessary like pieces of culture like to our young people, and just thinking about like the importance of that, because I think Nellie Musson in like the first part of the book like talks about the importance of seeing yourself reflected in your history and through your text, like through your art essentially. So for you, like in literature, how do you
It's
negotiate
rough.
that?
It's rough because I feel like as a Bermudian writer, as a child of the lineage of the Bermudian literary canon, I feel like I'm part of a dying art, meaning that my ancestors, my forebears are gone, and not only they're gone, but the work is just diminishing it before my eyes. And as an artist who practices in there, it's like I'm trying to very selfishly take as much as I can, But as an educator who teaches now within this, it's heartbreaking, right? Like I teach Mind the Onion Seed, but I teach the chapters that I have.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That is so, there's something in that I can't quite put my finger on, but that feels unbelievably limiting, but still so wholly huge, because I'm like, this is what we have, and this is what we have to meditate on and stay within and give honor to. But when I teach studies in Bermudian literature, which was previously helmed by my previous mentor, Dr. Angela Barry, who is a Bermudian writer, when I do teach it, it's one of those things where I feel like I'm teaching something that's already gone. I feel like I'm teaching Latin. You know what I'm saying? We don't speak Latin.
Right.
It's a dead language, and that makes me so sad. But it also makes me feel like I don't have time to mess around. I really don't have time to allow the Bermudian voice to be something that's just left in the air.
Yeah.
Because as a people, just on our own, like culturally, and I say this to my students when I'm teaching them rhetoric, when I'm supposed to be teaching them grammar, I'm like, no, let's talk about something else. Bermudians are important. And we are, like as a people, this country was, the second successful colony, yes, of the quote unquote New World. We was one of the first people in the world for English to be spoken on. This place has history that is deep. Like this is where a huge portion of the Atlantic slave trade came sliding through. What was it? 1816. The Edwin slid through her and brought us our first enslaved people, a Negro and an Indian. And this therein started the beginning of our harvest of our people. Bermuda is rife with culture. You know, as a people, it's what's so important. So when you talk about our text, like the history that we have there, to watch it as a small community just disappear into the ether, it is something that it is a heartbreak of which I cannot quite comprehend. And I hold to so like dearly. And I too get Nellie Musson in scraps. You know, what you send me pieces, I'm like, girl, where'd you get this from? Like, it's so important. But writing within the canon feels special. And you know that I write very directly for and to Bermudian people. Everyone else can listen, but it's for us. You know, that means something to me. And that text is a seminal work, and I think where you respond a lot to Mind the Onion Seed, I also do, but I directly respond to Mary Prince, because it was the first work written by a person of the Bermudian lineage. Like, it is our first published piece of literary work. It's phenomenal. And how is that not required reading?
Right. Exactly.
Don't ask me no more questions, girl. Crazy. Got off. That's ridiculous.
Thank you for sharing that, though.
No worries.
It's important. I think, you know, you're doing the necessary work, and so like every artist who's in here, please keep making the work. We need you. We're all lifting together, so keep pushing and keep making.
And since we're there, the heavy one. It's ubiquitous because it exists within us. You're never not home, because home is just with you. But we talked about just that pilgrimage to and from home as Bermudians, and especially distinctly as Bermudian artists. There is a movement that happens, an exodus that happens with us, more than likely, where we will leave. And how we interact with home, how home interacts with us when we're there and when we're not there. That movement to and fro, but not quite yet within. How does home show up in and for you, specifically as an entity? Because home can be so many things, right? Like, home can be the things that you love, the people that you love, the things that you do, right? But home also more poignantly as Bermuda, because this place is distinct. And I want to know, how does it show up for you? I know it shows up in your work as an onion, but how does it show up in you? And also, does this place have a space for you? Bermuda, a place where art is almost extracurricular. I say that, unfortunately, sitting in the National Gallery, but I also say that as a person with whom people were like, girl, you're still doing your little poems?
Right.
Over 12 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, but do you have a place here?
Yes. Okay. It's such a good question, because I honestly and truly feel like I didn't realize how important home was for me until I left. When you go like out into the world and you spend like some time like elsewhere, just little things you miss, people you miss, just the way that we engage as a people, like who's your people, you know, just certain things like that that you miss. And honestly, being in China was the thing that actually pointed me back west towards home, because being in the East, like particularly within China, they're very nationalistic people. Like Zhongguo, which is the Mandarin word for China, literally means like center of the world. They really believe that they were like the cradle of like civilization. They really and truly believe that. And so for me, being in a place like that where people were so focused on how they identify nationally, how they relate to one another, looking at their culture, just like their language, how they speak, how they engage with one another, observing that and the pride that they had for that really pointed me back towards Bermuda. Because I'm saying, okay, I'm in this place and I'm seeing how, these people love their land. They're of the land. They're of their own soil. They literally live their language. They're very much so connected with it. It made me feel, first of all, like incredibly observant of them as a people. But then it also just pointed me back to myself. Like China brought me back to myself. And so it felt like I needed to look at, okay, if these people have all of these amazing things that they're prideful about their home and where they come from, what is it about my home that I'm proud of? What is it about Bermuda that is special culturally? Like the way that we speak, the way that we engage with one another. And I think when I was here in Bermuda, I never thought about what makes Bermuda special or why I love it so much, right? Because I think sometimes we get rock fever where it feels like, I just need to get off the rock. I need to just leave and like expand. But
proximity.
I think, yeah, exactly. And so, being in China, like not only physically created that distance from home, but it also gave me like real perspective and insight into a special sort of niche pocket that we all exist in. Like we're a very niche culture and people, and we have so much to offer the world. And it just really made me think about home in a different way. And so thinking about what it was that I was going to present to the world, what was it about me specifically as a person that I could, a voice that I could carry, it had to begin with him. I couldn't like make work about, I felt like anything without looking back to him. And so Bermuda has been a guiding light for me in my practice, and I've become like sort of obsessed in a way with what it means to be Bermudian. And the work is looking at that, what it means to be a Bermudian person. And so when I think about him, although like I'm not physically here all the time in a studio practice making work here, I'm always making work for us, by us. So home it lives with me. I have actively every year since I began making art had some work that was shown on island at some place. So it's actually really interesting that you asked me about home, because the exhibition that we have here on view, Threads Unravelling, actually was first shown in the UK, in my first solo exhibition in the UK. And the organization where the work was held was actually called Home. It's called Home Manchester. And so even just like little things like that, it's like, what do we notice, right? Like how are the things that we're experiencing like interconnected? And so yes, I had that work at home in the UK, but that work belongs her at home. This is home for the work. And so it was really special for me, that I had the opportunity through BNG to be able to bring the work back home so that you guys could experience it, because the work is about you and for you. And so, yeah, I love Bermuda and, want to continue making work about us and about our culture, about our heritage. And so, like you said, home is It lives with me, and you know, that's the thing that I'm trying to unearth in the work.
It's everything. I think I when I was younger, I always wanted to leave Bermuda, which is fine. I think we all go through that little space where I'm like, get me off, Lord Jesus. Like, just,
Yeah.
everyone knows my business.
Yeah.
But then I hope there is something that happens that cultivates that need to come back and sow seeds, which is, of course, ancestral, right? Like, we do need to plant, which is what you do when you come home. Even, let's get scientific for a second, even our national bird is not the long-tailed ulat. Someone tell me what it is.
Go.
Sure is. Who said it? Hey, colleague. Hey, turning up for the college. Listen, it is a Lazarus species. And the kahal is such an interesting creature because it spans most of its life, almost its entire life, out at sea. Eating, gathering, living, growing, whatever. And it comes back home during a process called philopatry. I'm not a scientist. I'm not Christy. Aisha, it's okay. But it comes back home in order to breed, in order to give life, actually, to sow a seed. That's huge.
It is.
And so I've kind of always viewed myself as a cow. I'm like, I'm going to just go, gather what I need, eat, grow, become a person, and then come back home. You know, and I see that as how we do need to exist here.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that when we get past that initial stage of, I need to get off the island, sure, go gather, come back.
But then come back. It's true. Absolutely.
Um,
I just wanted to comment on that.
Sure.
Really quickly. Because every time I come back home, I do feel like that. I do feel like it's so nourishing to my mind, my body, and my spirit. Every time I come back home, I feel like I've gotten some things that I need to take back with me in my practice. And I would encourage every person who, you know, is thinking about spending some time away from home, which in the artistic industry, I feel like it's sort of necessary to sort of like go. And experience some things and, you know, live and then like with that perspective to be able to come back. But also like I literally can't afford to have a studio in Bermuda. That's the reality too. It's like I just can't. And so ideally I would love to be home and being able to like make, you know, the work consistently like that with the materials that I'm using. But it's also just like we're in the middle of the ocean, and so access is a real like sort of limitation, not only just for art but for any industry in
Girl, it's expensive to get apples, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, I would encourage every person to like maybe spend some time. There are other ways. You don't have to like live overseas. Like I take up opportunities such as residencies often. Like currently I'm at a residency in New York. I've been there for about 3 weeks now, and I'm going back in to spend another couple of weeks before I head back to the UK. But residencies are a real way that you could spend like focused time sort of away, and then you can be able to like come back. But any person who is like interested in like maybe sort of like the nitty-gritty of like how it sort of functions or how I navigate, like I'm happy to share, but that's a whole different talk. But yeah.
We got a little time check. And so I'm going to open it up to the floor, but I first want to just say, Gherdai, I'm always in awe of you. I am grateful to be a peer of yours. I love to be able to just view your work and how you grow and how you change and how you represent and become us for us. And thank you for being here and talking with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming to BTA's first event for Art Month. It's a vibe. Turn up, turn up. Go to all the other ones. I didn't have to memorize them because Jennifer said it before me. But check out the website. And,
Yes, please do.
and questions. Who's got
I don't
them?
know if anybody